All right. Well, we're going to get started because we only have 40 minutes. I'm on the Zoom account that has limited access to just 40 minutes. So that way you guys can get on with your evening and you don't have to listen to me drone on and on. My name is Christine Graves. I'm the Network Specialist of Operations and Programming for Network 3. I oversee the chapters at DePaul, University of Chicago, Illinois State, Purdue, and University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. But I invited all of the 13 Network 3 chapters to this today because there are missing, there are two missing network specialists of operations and programming. Right now, I'm the only one, and there's supposed to be three. So I thought if any of the other chapters wanted to come, they'd be welcome. Um, and so that's why we're doing this. We're doing this because chapter properties is an area that can be hard or it can be easy, depending if you have a house or not. Um, the training that people get for this is minimal, and the vice president of operations, which oversees this office, is trained during Leadership Academy, but sometimes the information doesn't trickle down. And so I just thought I'd run this little bit of a webinar just to make sure that you guys knew what you were supposed to be doing and knew who to go to if you have any questions or concerns. Um, and so we're going to get started with, okay, so we've got a chapter advisor here for Beta Phi. We got the Beta Phi chapter at Indiana University. Caitlin is the director of chapter properties from Ball State. Casey's the Phi Upsilon advisor, and Kaylee is the chapter advisor for Delta. And Kaylee was just on my other call. So welcome back, Kaylee. All right. So what is chapter properties? Well, chapter properties is the office that oversees all the property that the chapter owns. Very often people think it's just the house, but it's not. It's all the property. I came from a chapter at University of Chicago that does not have a house. And so, yes, the chapter property was still an officer and she still had to oversee the chapter property, which included all the ritual equipment, the robes, the all the stuff that we use for alumni dinner, all this recruitment materials, everything that we kept in a storage space. So her job in part was to work with properties and make sure that we had enough money in the budget to pay for a storage space. And so it's not just the house, but it is a big chunk if you have a house. So I wanted to go over some of the foundational documents that chapter property people should be aware of before they well, you guys have already gotten started in your position, but I'm going to share my screen so that you can see what I'm talking about. So um, when you first get elected, the first thing you should do is you should go into your chapter's Alpha Link, and you can see here there's a section that says properties. You can go under properties, and I'm using University of Chicago here because this was my chapter a while ago. Um, and you can see here there are different tiles you can press on to get different information. So one of the things that you guys are in charge of is making sure that the collegians and the new members sign their properties agreements, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. What we're going to talk about right now is the 5-year plan calls. I know that that properties at headquarters is a wholly owned subsidiary of the fraternity. And so properties at headquarters is reaching, they have liaisons for all the different networks. And your liaison just reached out to you to plan a 5-year call. Every year, right around now, properties will reach out to each chapter and schedule a call where you go over the priorities for the next 5 years for your chapter, what they want to do. And what they use that 5-year call for is to develop the budgets. And so this is where you would go to find it in Alpha Link. And you can see here that it has the corporation budgets and the annual reviews. This is what a budget looks like. This is the budget for Phi Chi at University of Chicago. Um, they have their revenue. The revenue, obviously, you can see here, it comes from the corporation operating fee and the new member fee. And then they try to guesstimate how many people are going to be in the chapter and how many new members you're going to get. They base that on historical numbers and what your trends are in your chapter. So that's how they come up with your revenue number. Your expense numbers, all of these are pretty similar for most. FICI does not have a house. So this is a budget of a chapter that does not have a house. So ACRA is something you can't get away from. That's something that you have to pay for. Bad debt is a line item to cover the costs of the people who end up not paying for their corporation fees. And so that impacts your revenue here. So it makes up for any lost revenue. Bank fees are for overdrafts and credit card fees, things like that. Convention LA, you're supposed to be budgeting for convention in LA every year. It's not called LI anymore now. It's what do they call it? Camp AOPI or Camp AOPI. Food. There's always a budget for food, and you can use that food in any event that has all of the sisters at. So, like, you can, a lot of chapters use it for chapter dinners or for recruitment, pizza for work week or something like that. Insurance expenses is just to insure the property that the chapter owns, whether it's a chapter with very little property like this one, or if it's a chapter that owns a house, it's going to pay for your homeowner's insurance and things like that. Legal is just what every year the lawyers look over your insurance and all those documents to make sure everything's still in order. So obviously, $21 is like what 10 minutes of a lawyer's time. Other, you have to work out with properties what other means. It can mean different things in different chapters. Rent expense, the FICI uses this money to rent rooms on campus to have meetings and events. They also rent places for rituals and other big events. The chapter's not recognized by the university, so they have to pay to rent space. Ritual supplies, obviously, that's for ritual things. If you need to buy robes or stoles or new equipment or anything like that. And then storage expense here, they have a line item for a storage space. So you can see here that's what the expense and the income, and it works out. So this is telling you what they expect the fees to be each year. So the new member corporation fees 100, the corporation operating fees $127. So that's what your budget looks like. This is what you're going to be talking about when you do your 5-year calls in the next month or two with properties. They want to sit down and talk to you and say, okay, you have a house and your elevator is on the fritz and it's not working. So that's a priority. We need to get that fixed. But we are also looking to see that your air conditioning system is, 15 years old and it's getting toward the end of its useful life, and we might want to start budgeting to replace the air conditioning in the next couple of years. So the 5-year calls are all about looking ahead and anticipating and planning for the improvements to the house that you need or in furniture as well. You might want to replace all the mattresses, 1 year if they haven't been replaced in 10 years. Or you might want to start a rotating basis so that you're not replacing them all in 1 year, but you might start a rotating basis where you do 10 per year or something like that to try and spread the costs over several years. Obviously, you should be talking with your chapter about what their wants and needs are in terms of the house. If some chapters have very strong opinions about remodeling that needs to happen, and you should talk to properties about that too, because properties does take requests for renovations that need to be done, whether it's like a room, like a bathroom that needs to be updated, plumbing that needs to be fixed, carpeting that needs to be replaced, things like that. So that's what these 5-year calls are about. It's about talking about what you want for the next 5 years and then getting an idea of these expenses and revenues so that they can establish these budgets. So I expect that all of you chapter property directors, or if you're one of the chapters in a small or extra small structure, that you would be the VPO overseeing this, that you are aware of these budgets and you're participating in these 5-year calls. So then I'm going to take you to the next thing that happens. We have that nice little budget. And so what properties does is every month they send you an update on your budget. So this again, this is FICA. This is as of December 2024. So this is your budget that was established with properties. You can see all the same categories here. And what they have is they have actual and budgeted. So they have an actual against what the budget was for the year. So this is for the month of December 2024. So this is for fiscal year and year to date. So fiscal year 2025, you guys budgeted that you were gonna get $16,510 in corporation operating fees. But to date, as of December 2024, you've only gotten $12,458. And it says here that means you're at 75% of what was expected. So obviously, if your revenue's down, that means that your spending has to be adjusted as well. But the school year's not over, so perhaps you can make up for that missing revenue by initiating some more people. So this is just, I wanted you to be aware that once a month you should be getting these monthly financial summaries. It's coming from Zach Olario at headquarters, the property. And it's a monthly summary of all the revenues and expenses that have happened in the last month. And you should be checking it against your budget every month when it comes in. It gives you your cash balances and your different accounts. So I hope you guys have been looking at this, and if you haven't, if you have questions, you can let me know. Every chapter gets this, but when you get it, it's all X's, X's, X's. You can't see anything until you put in your corporation number and your chapter code. So you have to put those. This is what it looks like if you don't have the codes and stuff. So you have to put in the corporation number and the code in order to get to your chapters numbers. If you need those numbers and codes, let me know. We can get those to you. Okay? So that covers the 5-year calls, it covers your yearly budget, and it covers your monthly summaries. All right? So that's part of what you do is chapter property. Another part of what you do with chapter property is that you go over and make track to make sure everybody in the chapter is signing their housing and corporation fee agreements. This is something that each member has to access through AlphaLink on their own, and they go through and here's the AlphaLink instructions. They go and they see these tiles and they click on them, and then it comes up and they fill in their name and they check boxes and say that they are going to agree to the corporation fees and their payment plans. If you have a house, there's also housing agreements that you have to get them to sign every year. I think most of you who have houses have probably already done that by now. I think usually in the fall quarter is when you get commitments for the following year for people living in the house. So those are some of the responsibilities that Chapter Properties has. They have the 5-year call once a year where they develop the 5-year wants and needs. They work on the chapter budget with properties. Now, properties will send you an email sometime in the fall, usually in November, but I think maybe even this year they did it in October. They'll send you an email about the budget for the chapter for the year. So they did it in October or November of 2024 for the 2025-2026 budget. So they're doing this almost a year in advance. So you need to make sure that you're paying attention in the fall when that email comes through to make sure that you look over the budget that's been proposed by properties. Make sure that it's in line with what you talked with properties about in their 5-year call this spring. And you want to make sure that you talk it over with your chapter, with your E-team, and with your advisors to make sure that it's still in alignment with what the chapter needs and wants, and still the guesstimates that they've made about chapter roster numbers and the number of new members you're getting is still pretty close to what you guys predicted in the spring. So make sure in the fall you're looking to make sure that you're getting your budget email. They don't give you very long to look at it and comment because if you don't get back to them by the deadline, they just that's the budget then, and there's nothing that can be done after that. You have to beg headquarters to try and get them to change it after that date. So that's pretty important. And then you have to make sure that all these are signed. Now, these have to be signed by a certain date, and if they're not signed by a certain date, then the chapter gets fined $100. It's a really pretty hefty fee. So you want to make sure that you get these signed as soon as possible. I would recommend that once they're put up in AlphaLink, and corporation, or I'm sorry, properties will notify you in the fall once these are up on AlphaLink. I would recommend you just go to a chapter meeting and take a few minutes out of chapter time and have everybody just go on AlphaLink right there while they're at the meeting and fill it out and get it done. And then you'll have a much smaller number of people to track down and try and get them to sign these agreements. There's also a housing agreement if you have a house, and then you're working with your house director as well on things. So those are kind of the documents I wanted to share. And I wanted to talk a little bit about if you have a house, because I know some of the people on this call actually manage a house or are involved in working with a house. So if you have a house, you got a lot more work to do if you're chapter properties. If you have a house you're in your chapter properties, you should be making sure every year you have house rules. Chapters have different names for it, but basically what it is that they're house rules that people who live in and out of the house agree to every year for behavior in the house. So in some chapters that means there's a rotation of who takes the garbage out and who does this and who does that. Um, in some chapters it has to do with scheduling some really big chapters schedule dinners on a staggered basis. So, I mean, things like that. There are expectations for non-live-ins for when they come to the house, how they're going to behave. They're not going to eat the live-ins food. They're not going to, leave a mess. They're going to treat it as their own and try and keep it nice and so that everybody wants to live there still, and they don't want to make it too terrible. If you're chapter properties director, you're also working with the house manager, or the house director, and that's usually a woman who's been hired by the fraternity to live in the house and help administer things, such as the cook. I think right now we're still using College Fresh. And so the house director and the chapter properties person work on scheduling meals, as a liaison between the women in the house and then the cooks about what they want for meals, for special events, and for activities and outings and things like that. Um, so you're working with that. And then if you're chapter properties and you have a house, it's your job to keep track of who is not following the house rules and referring them to MI. And then you possibly might have to go to some MI meetings if they're not um, adhering to what they agreed to as behavior rules, like no drinking, boys and all the curfews and quiet hours and things like that in the house. So those are some things. I really wanted to go over the documents because a lot of people don't understand what the documents are or are unaware of them. So I wanted to go over those and talk a little bit about the challenges of being a chapter properties director. It's not an easy job, especially if you don't have a house, or especially if you have a house. Um, and so I see here that got um, we've got people from Ball State, from Purdue, from Missouri, Indiana University, and Illinois State University. So you guys are all fairly big chapters, and I think you all have houses. I'm not positive. Caitlin, we have to get your number from corporation, from headquarters. I have the numbers of the 5 chapters under me, but I don't have them for the whole network, but I can get it. Um, I can get it. I'll just have to remember to do that. Okay, and Caitlin, you're from which? You're from Ball State. Okay, I'll ask properties and I'll get it back to you, Ball State. All right, so I want to see you guys are. I think all of you have houses. If you don't have a house, raise your hand in the so I can't see anyone's faces. Everybody's all black boxes. So Angela, you raised your hand. So does that mean that Indiana, was that Indiana? Oh, Kaylee, you're muted.
Sorry, we have a house. I didn't realize I raised my hand.
Oh,
I'm having computer trouble tonight, so I'm on my phone.
well, okay. So Ball State, you say you don't have a house. I think you're the only one here who doesn't.
Correct. Ball State, none of our sororities have houses.
Okay. So as a chapter that does not have a house, what are the biggest challenges that you're seeing as chapter properties manager right now in the chapter?
So I can't lie, I feel like DCP is a pretty easy role for our chapter because we don't have a house. Instead, we have two storage units on at a storage unit facility off campus. So as DCP, I basically just manage the storage units. I keep track of the keys to the storage units and get them around to people who need them when they need to go visit the storage units to get any things out of there, I guess.
Okay. Do you have trouble? One of the troubles that I've seen with chapters that do not have houses is that the keys often get lost or mislaid, and chapter property gets lost over time. Is that something that you guys experience as well?
So in my time throughout AOPI, that has been an issue. Specifically, my freshman year, that was kind of an issue because we only had two storage unit keys at the time, so it was really easy for us to just not have access to it. But the person who was director of chapter property before me made sure that we contacted headquarters and contacted our storage unit um, owner, I guess, of the corporation to get more keys for it. So now we have more keys. That way it's easier for everyone to access the storage unit when needed.
But are you finding that they're putting the stuff back when they're done with it?
Yeah, we do a pretty good job making sure that it's organized. That was another big issue that I know we faced in the past was that it was just a hot mess in the storage unit.
Mhm.
Um, and then again, because it's off campus, sometimes there's not exactly a sense of urgency to return things to the storage unit.
Mhm.
I know me personally, I've had stuff in the back of my car for weeks on end just because I haven't had the chance to either get a storage unit key and then take it to the storage unit or just get to the storage unit in general.
Mhm.
So, but we've been working on implementing a better checkout period that's more standard. That way, people know that they'll have the storage unit key for X amount of time. That way they can get what they need and then put it back in a timely manner to make sure that it's all returns.
So I'd recommend that you are, or maybe you could get a work group together to create an actual item by item inventory of what's in your storage unit so you know what's there. And then as people take it out, you know who took it out and when, so that if it's isn't returned, you know who to go to and you know how long it's been gone.
Okay.
That's one of the disadvantages of having too many sets of keys out there. Um, because the keys I don't know, you're not sure who has them and you don't know when they're going and coming. And so, yeah, just I'd recommend having an inventory and having some kind of inventory tracking so that you know. So, the people who do have houses, what is the biggest issue that you're dealing with in your chapter right now? What's the biggest challenge?
For us right now, we kind of had like a huge transition this summer. We had a house mom, I think, for like 15 years. And so, but she didn't come back this year. So just, learning, especially for the live-ins who had lived in the previous year, like, learning the way that different directors run things. And then we also got a new chef, as well as a new fire marshal for the university who was like super strict. So we've just been, um, just trying to work with all these different types of like leadership styles and different ways things have been run than in the past, but it's going well.
Good, good. Is anybody having trouble filling their beds?
We always have like one or two empty beds a year,
Yeah.
but next year we're only having one, and this year we have like three or four.
Okay. So that, are you from Beta New?
No, I'm from Five Salon.
Upsilon. Okay. Um, yeah, so the only way you can really fill your beds is make sure that you're recruiting and that you're getting quota and you get up to chapter total so that you have enough people who a bigger pool of people to draw from to stay in house. One thing that some chapters have done is institute um, rules about how many years you can live in, who lives in, the order that they live in, and people who try and skirt out of living in at all ever in the 4 years that they're in the university and they don't live in the house at all, they have to actually pay for a bed, even though they're not living in it. So there are lots of different ways that the chapters are instituting incentives to get people to live in the house. The best thing to do is to try and make it fun to live in the house so that everybody will want to live in the house and not make it so onerous on people. Another thing another chapter did is that they actually did a PowerPoint. Their financial advisor did a PowerPoint to the chapter explaining how living in the house was actually cheaper than living in an apartment nearby. Because your room and board at the house includes, food and it includes furniture, it includes insurance, it includes, all your utilities, it includes a lot of things that you pay separately for when you live in an apartment. Um, so that's something else you can take and think about doing with your chapter is doing a financial presentation, actually comparing what the costs are for living in and living out. Um, okay, what other issues are going on? Um, does anybody have any problems with your housing right now? With your chapter members? Is everybody following the rules? Everybody, your house is in good shape? You're not having trouble with headquarters getting requests fulfilled? It sounds like everything is going super well. I know that chapter property at headquarters has had a turnover, and we have recently had Jessica Rice, who was our liaison for so long, recently left the organization, and she got a new job, I think. But we have a new person, and his name is Emery Price, and he's the liaison for most of Network 3 now. So you should have been getting some email. I've already gotten some emails from Emery, so you guys should have been getting some emails from him about corporation issues. If you're not getting them, please let me know and we can make sure that you start getting them. You should also be getting a monthly corporation newsletter that just comes out. It has general corporation information once a month. If you're not getting that, please let me know. They send it to everyone who's registered uh, as chapter properties, and so it goes to the email that you have in Alpha Link under your name. So you make sure that you're using the same email. Do you guys have any questions or concerns or comments? If you go to Fulfilling the Promise, there are quite a lot of resources there for chapter properties officers um, in terms of what the agreements are supposed to look like and working with the chapter property budget and things like that. Do you guys have any questions, any concerns, anything that's going on? Go ahead, Kaylee.
Okay, so we have housing that we have to fill, but it's technically like campus housing.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't come with like the cook or all of that stuff. So how would you, and it's not necessarily cheaper than living in an apartment. We're dealing with that right now.
Yeah.
So what are some ideas to incentivize people living on campus in the sorority house?
You can come up, have as chapter properties person in your director of chapter properties, you can come up with all kinds of fun things to do for the people who live together, even if it's not owned by AOPI and it's owned by the university. Is it like a suite or a flat or something like that?
Yeah, so it has like a living room, a kitchen, and then 2 bedrooms. So 4 people live in each one, and we have 3 units.
Okay, so you've got like 12 people living together?
Yeah.
Okay, so just try and make it as fun as possible for those 12 people so that people
Okay.
want to. Talk about the convenience of being on campus and closer to things. Um, if it doesn't, there's no financial incentive for it, if it costs more to live there, then you're just going to have to
Hmm.
emphasize the fun stuff.
Okay.
And try and make things fun. Have secret Santas during the holidays. Have egg hunts in the spring. Have things that the live-ins do. Maybe they could have special meals once a month or something like that, to really create a bond and a culture of happiness and fun, so that other people will want to. And they have to be your greatest marketing tool. I mean, they have to talk about how much fun it is to live in the house. If people are constantly complaining about living in the house, then no one's going to want to live there. So you need to talk with them about making sure that they are um, being a good spokesperson. You don't want them to lie, but you don't want them to be constantly complaining either. Does anybody have that problem? Does anyone else have that problem where you're having trouble filling the house and maybe it isn't cheaper and you've got to come up with reasons? Anyone? No?
Well, I know it's not like cheap to live in, but like we don't have like a problem necessarily with like people not wanting to live in. It's just that like we recruit a certain number and like you're allowed to rush as a sophomore.
Mhm.
So there's people that have already signed like leases and everything too.
Mhm.
So like they don't want to drop a lease to live in a house.
Mhm. And
So like we have that issue.
on some campuses, um, headquarters will pay any penalties for breaking a lease so that people could live in the house. So that's something you might want to talk to uh, headquarters about, the properties people at headquarters, to see if that's an option for you guys. Yeah, I understand sometimes sophomores will come into fall recruitment, and by the time recruitment's over and by the time they're initiated, they've already signed a lease for the next year. But there's a possibility that whatever penalties they are in breaking the lease, that AOPI would pay for that or take it out of their corporation budget or something. So that's an option. It's a last resort kind of option, but it is an option. Does anybody know of any other solutions to any creative solutions to getting people to live in the house? One of the things one of my chapters did is they were having trouble. Most of the rooms in the house were set up as triples or quads. And what they did is they worked with headquarters to create doubles and singles. And there's different pricing for that. But once they started offering singles to people, um, some of the upperclassmen were more willing to live in the house because it's not that they didn't want to live in the house, they just didn't want roommates anymore. It is more expensive to have a single, but it's more expensive to have a single in the dorms as well. And it's more expensive to have a single if you're living in an apartment rather than sharing a room with a roommate. So it's not very different than any other housing arrangement. So that's also an option. If you're finding people don't want to live in the house because of they don't want to share a room, then you can possibly create some singles or even some doubles. Going down from a quad or a triple to a double can sometimes make a difference because there's a little bit more room and the people feel more comfortable. So that's also an option, a creative one. Some chapters have also started requiring people living in the house for 2 years and not just 1 year. One chapter, I think, instituted a rule that if you didn't live in the house, you still had to pay to cover the empty beds. So they're choosing to live outside the house, but then they're still kind of paying for the bed anyway. So it kind of incentivizes people to possibly live in anyway. Do any of your other do any of your chapters have any other ideas to deal with that? What are some other issues that are you dealing with? I know one of my chapters has been having issues with the people who don't live in the house. We're coming in and eating the food from the people who do live there. They come in and they make messes and they don't clean it up. How do you guys deal with those types of issues?
I was gonna say we're actually have the opposite issue where we have too many people wanting to live in and not enough people like necessarily like so what we do is we let the new members get first priority to live in as well as people with positions, especially like exec and obviously my position. And then we kind of go based off house points for people in like the sophomores who have already lived in the house because we want to give everyone an opportunity to be able to live in. And so usually we yeah, that's just recently started becoming an issue because our recruitment sizes have grown as well as our PC. So uh we used to have a 5 girl and now we're making it a 6 girl just to add an extra bed, just so that, at least one more person can live in.
Well, that's a great problem to have. What your chapter is doing is exactly what most chapters do. Is they give priority to the new members, and then executive team, and then officers in a ranking system, and then basing it on points accrued during the year for the rest of the chapter members who aren't officers. So yeah, that's very common. Well, and congratulations to you for having a lot of demand in your house for your housing. That's great. Um, so we've got about a minute and a half left on the session. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up? I appreciate you all coming. If you have any questions or concerns, you can always contact me, or we could contact Emery at headquarters. We're both resources for you in terms of chapter property issues. Chapter property is always interesting because it could be a leaked roof or an MI issue with girls drinking in their room. So it runs the gamut of issues that you could deal with. It's good practice for later on in life, dealing with all kinds of stuff. If there's nothing else, do you guys have anything else? I just see, I don't, all of you guys are black screen, so I can't tell if anybody has anything else more to say. But if not, I will let you go and get back to your evening. Thank you for coming. Again, if you have any questions or concerns, you can always email me at the email address, christinemgraves@comcast.net, which was in the original email for this session. I recorded it, and when it has to convert, but maybe next week sometime I'll send out the recording if anybody wants it. Okay? If so, have a good night, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.